The night was quiet in the small town where Daniel lived. The streets were empty and most people were asleep, but Daniel could not find rest. He sat on the old wooden steps of his porch, staring at the sky. He often felt like his life was too small, like the world was moving somewhere beyond his reach and he was left behind. He worked at a local hardware store during the day, and at night he read old books or listened to the radio. Nothing ever changed, and sometimes he wondered if he was meant for anything at all. That was when the sky lit up. At first he thought it was a shooting star, but the light was too bright, too sharp, and it moved with strange patterns across the dark canvas of the heavens. It left a glowing trail behind, one that split the clouds apart and made the quiet night look like day. For a few seconds, Daniel stood, his heart beating faster. The light grew bigger, closer until the sound followed. Like thunder, like something tearing the air apart. It roared above him, and then disappeared behind the hills that lined the edge of town. Moments later, the ground shook under his feet, and in the distance he heard the crash. For a moment, Daniel just stood there. His common sense told him to stay home, to lock the door, and wait until morning. But something else inside him, some restless part that had always wondered about the world beyond his small town, pushed him forward. He grabbed a flashlight, slipped on his jacket, and hurried down the dirt road toward the woods. The trees loomed, tall and dark as he entered the forest, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the branches. The smell of smoke guided him, and soon he noticed the faint glow of fire ahead. His steps quickened even though fear crept into his chest. As he pushed past the thick brush, he found it. The wreck was nothing like anything he had ever seen. Metal twisted into shapes that made no sense. Glowing symbols across a broken surface that hissed with sparks. Strange pieces of machinery were scattered across the ground, still smoking. Daniel froze, the truth hitting him harder than the crash itself. This was not a plane, not a helicopter, not anything made on Earth. He stepped closer, his breath short, his hand shaking as he lifted the flashlight toward the wreck. And then he saw her. Lying on the ground, half covered in broken parts of the ship, was a figure. At first he thought it was a woman, but as he looked closer, he realized she was not human. Her skin had a faint shimmer, as if it caught the light in ways flesh never could. Her hair fell like silver threads, and her eyes, when they opened, glowed, softly, like light reflected off water. She looked at him, and though she seemed weak, her gaze was sharp, like she was searching his very soul. Daniel took a step back, his heart pounding, his voice caught in his throat, and he did not know if he should run or help. But before he could decide, she moved her lips. Her voice was soft, almost broken, but the words were clear. "You're the one I need." The world stopped for Daniel. He could not make sense of what she had said, but the weight of her words pressed on him like a stone. She reached out weakly, her hand trembling, and then her body collapsed back onto the ground. Daniel's instincts finally took over. He rushed forward, kneeling beside her, unsure what he was even supposed to do. She was breathing, but faintly. Her body looked hurt, scratched and bruised, though her wounds were unlike anything he had ever seen. Some of the cuts glowed faintly as though her blood carried light. He looked back at the wreck, then at the sky. No one else was here yet. No sirens, no authorities, no neighbors. He was alone, and this strange being, this alien, was looking to him. "You're the one I need." The words echoed in his mind again and again. Why him? Out of all the people in the world, why would someone like her say that to him? Daniel shook his head, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He knew he could not leave her here. If others found her, they might not help her, they might take her, cage her, or worse. And despite his fear, despite the madness of what had just happened, something inside him told him she had trusted him with those words. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, yet strange. He started, back toward his home, each step heavy with questions he could not answer. The woods seemed darker now, every sound sharper, every shadow deeper, but Daniel kept going, holding the alien close, his mind spinning with fear and wonder. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. And as the night swallowed the light of the crash behind him, Daniel realized he had stepped into a story far bigger than anything his small town could ever hold. Daniel reached his barn just as the first light of dawn was touching the sky. His arms ached from carrying the strange woman, but he did not stop until he pushed open the wide wooden doors and stepped inside. He gently placed her on a pile of old hay covered with a blanket, then stepped back, breathing hard. His heart was still racing from the night, from the crash, and from her words that would not leave his mind. "You're the one I need." He stared at her for a long time. She lay still, her chest rising and falling slowly. In the soft light, she looked both fragile and strong, as if she belonged to two worlds at once. Her skin caught the glow of the rising sun, reflecting it in faint patterns like silver veins. Daniel rubbed his face, trying to convince himself he was not dreaming. He thought about calling someone. Maybe the sheriff, maybe the hospital. But the moment that idea came to him, he pushed it away. He knew what would happen. They would take her away, lock her in some lab, and he would never see her again. And deep down, he felt that if she had spoken those words to him, then it was his duty to protect her. As the morning grew brighter, Daniel brought water and a clean cloth. He knelt beside her and carefully dabbed the strange glowing cuts on her arms. Her skin was cool, almost too cool, but she did not resist. After a moment, her eyes opened again. She looked at him, and Daniel froze. Her silver eyes were filled with something he could not name. Not fear, not anger, but a deep weight, as though she carried the burden of stars. "Where am I?" she asked softly. Her voice was strange but clear, as if his language was not her own, but she had somehow learned it. "You're on Earth," Daniel said. His voice cracked and he cleared his throat. "This is my barn. You crashed last night." Her gaze swept around the barn, the wooden beams, the old tools, the dust in the air. She closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "I see. I survived. What are you?" The question left Daniel's lips before he could stop it. He felt rude, but he needed to know. She opened her eyes again and studied him. "My name is Kaylin," she said slowly. "I am not from this world. My people, we travel the stars, but our enemies found me. They tried to end my journey. My ship brought me here. To you." Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. He had guessed she was not human, but hearing her speak it made it real. "Why me? Why did you say that?" he asked, his voice low. Kaylin's gaze did not waver. "Because humans are different. My people know this. Long ago they studied your world. They saw something in you that others cannot understand. I was told if I ever fell into darkness to seek one of your kind. When I looked at you, I knew. You are the one I need." Daniel blinked, unable to breathe for a moment. Him? Out of all the people in the world, why would she need him? He was just an ordinary man in a forgotten town. "I think you've made a mistake," he said nervously. "I'm no one. I can't help you." "Help." Kaylin shook her head, her silver hair falling across her face. "You are wrong. You may not see it, but it is there. Your people are unpredictable. That is what makes you strong. That is why I need you." Before Daniel could answer, a sound outside made him jump. He rushed to the barn door and peeked through the cracks. A low hum filled the air, and when he looked up, he saw a small object moving above the trees. It was not a bird or a plane. It was something else, something that glowed faintly, hovering like a watchful eye. He hurried back to Kaylin. "Someone's here. Something's looking for you." Her face grew tense, her body stiffening despite her injuries. "They found me already. The hunters will come. You must not let them see me." Daniel swallowed hard. His life had been simple yesterday. Today he was hiding an alien woman in his barn while strange machines searched the skies. He could feel his old world slipping away, and something new, dangerous and impossible, taking its place. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, his hands shaking. "You will learn," Kaylin said firmly. Her voice was soft but carried strength. "That is what makes you human. Daniel stared at her, his chest tight. He did not know why, but he believed her. And even though fear pressed on him like a heavy shadow, another feeling stirred inside him, a spark he had not felt in years. For the first time, Daniel thought maybe his life was not small after all. Maybe this was the beginning of something greater. As the strange hum grew louder outside, he knew one thing for certain. He had made his choice the moment he carried her from the crash. He would protect her no matter what came next. Daniel did not sleep that night. He stayed in the barn, sitting on a stool near Kaylin while the strange hum in the sky came and went. Sometimes it grew louder, like something searching overhead. Then it faded into the distance. Every time he thought it was gone for good, it returned again. The hours passed slowly, and Daniel's nerves were stretched tight. Kaylin rested quietly, her body still weak, but her eyes were open now. She watched him more than she spoke, as if she were studying his every move. Daniel felt strange under her gaze, but he also felt a sense of trust he could not explain. Finally, when the morning light slipped through the cracks of the barn, Daniel leaned forward and asked, "What are they looking for? Those things in the sky?" Kaylin's voice was calm, though her words carried weight. "They are seekers, machines sent by my enemies. They follow energy from my ship. They will not stop until they find me." Daniel's stomach tightened. "And if they do? Then others will come," she said softly. "Hunters, soldiers. They will take me, and if they know you have seen me, they will not let you live either." The word struck Daniel hard. His quiet life was already gone, but hearing it said so directly made it real. He rubbed his hands together, trying to steady himself. "Why? Why are they chasing you?" Kaylin took a slow breath before answering. "Because I know the truth about their weapon, something they call the Veil. It is not a weapon like your guns or bombs. It is far worse. It changes the mind. Entire worlds fall without a single shot fired. The people are turned into servants, their thoughts rewritten, their will erased. No one resists." Daniel felt a chill run through him. The way she said it made it sound less like war and more like theft of the soul. "That's impossible," he whispered. Her silver eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "It is very possible. My people have watched it happen. We have lost many allies to it. But when they tested it against humans long ago, it failed. Your kind cannot be controlled by it. Something in your nature rejects it. That is why I came here. That is why I said you are the one I need." Daniel leaned back, his mind spinning. "Wait, you're saying humans can't be brainwashed by this thing?" Kaylin nodded slowly. "Yes. My people could not understand why. Humans are unpredictable. You do not follow the patterns we expect. Even when everything tells you to obey, you resist. Even when logic says you cannot win, you fight. It is not order. It is chaos. But it is powerful. And it may be the only thing that can stop the Veil." Daniel gave a short, nervous laugh. "That doesn't sound like much of a plan. I can't fight an army. I can't even fix my truck without help." Kaylin tilted her head slightly, studying him again. "Do not dismiss yourself so quickly. You carried me from the wreck. You hid me. You have already chosen to fight even if you do not know it." Her words struck him deeply because she was right. He had chosen. He could have walked away. He could have left her there in the forest. But he hadn't. Something inside him would not allow it. The hum returned, louder this time, and Daniel jumped to his feet. He peered through a gap in the barn wall and froze. The small hovering machine was back, closer than before. Its surface shone like metal and glass, and a single red light scanned the ground below as it drifted toward the barn. "They've found us," Daniel whispered. Kaylin sat up, her face pale but determined. "You must hide me. If they see me, the hunters will land soon after." Daniel's heart pounded. He looked around the barn, searching for a place. He pulled open the trapdoor to the old root cellar beneath the floor. It was cramped and dark, but it was hidden. "Get in," he said quickly. Kaylin hesitated, her body weak, but Daniel helped her down the steps. She looked at him once more, her eyes filled with something like trust. "Do not let them take me," she whispered. He closed the trapdoor just as the Seeker's shadow moved across the barn. The red light swept over the walls, crawling like fire. Daniel stood still, hardly breathing. The hum grew louder until it felt like the machine was right above him. Then slowly it faded again, drifting back toward the trees. Daniel waited several minutes before he dared to open the trapdoor again. Kaylin climbed out, her movements slow but steady. She looked at him with quiet approval. "You did well," she said. He shook his head, still trembling. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. They'll keep searching. They'll come again." "Yes," Kaylin said firmly. "But you are not alone anymore. We face this together." Daniel stared at her, realizing that nothing in his life would ever be simple again. He had wanted something bigger, something beyond his small town. Now it was here, and it might destroy everything. But for the first time, he felt like he had a purpose. He was part of something greater. The Seekers would return. The Hunters would come. And when they did, Daniel knew he would have to make a choice, to run or to fight. And deep inside, he already knew which choice he would make. The next 2 days passed like a blur. Daniel hardly left the barn except to bring food and water. Kaylin grew stronger, though she was still weak from her injuries. The strange glow on her wounds slowly faded, leaving pale lines on her skin. She spent much of her time explaining things that Daniel could barely believe, yet somehow he knew she was telling the truth. He learned about her people, travelers of the stars who had built vast alliances across many worlds. He learned about their enemies, a ruthless empire that spread the veil across every planet they touched. And he learned that her mission was never meant to bring her to Earth, but fate, or maybe desperation, had driven her here. Daniel listened, struggling to take it all in. He had always imagined life beyond Earth, but to see it before him, sitting in his barn, was something else entirely. What surprised him most was not just her words, but the way she looked at him, as if he was not ordinary at all, as if he mattered more than he ever believed he could. But the peace did not last. On the third night, the Seekers returned. This time there were 3 of them, their red lights sweeping across the woods and fields like hunting dogs searching for a scent. Daniel and Kaylin watched from a crack in the barn wall as the machines hovered low, their hum filling the air. "Like a swarm of insects, they are closing in," Kaylin whispered. "The Hunters will not be far behind." Daniel's stomach tightened. "How many Hunters?" "Enough," she said simply. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He walked into town and met with his closest friend, Mark, a man who had grown up with him and knew the woods as well as he did. Daniel did not tell him everything, but he explained enough to make Mark's face pale. At first Mark laughed, thinking it was a wild story, but when Daniel's serious eyes did not waver, he slowly nodded. "If what you're saying is true," Mark said, lowering his voice, "then we're in trouble." Daniel nodded. "I can't do this alone. I need help." Mark agreed, and soon Daniel had drawn in a few more trusted friends. He did not reveal Kaylin to them, only spoke of strange machines and a threat that no one else could handle. In a small town like theirs, people trusted one another. They did not ask too many questions when danger was close. By the time Daniel returned to the barn, Kaylin was waiting for him, her silver eyes calm but sharp. "You brought others into this?" she asked. "I can't fight alone," Daniel said, firmly. "If Hunters are coming, I need people who know this land. We can hide. We can set traps. We can confuse them. You said it yourself. Humans are unpredictable. Let's use that." For the first time since she had arrived, Kaylin gave him a faint smile. "Perhaps you're right." That night the Hunters landed. Daniel first heard them as a deep rumble in the sky, lower than any plane, heavier than thunder. The Seekers scattered, their red lights dancing, and then beams of pale light cut through the clouds. Daniel grabbed his rifle, not that it would do much, and ran to the barn. Kaylin stood already, her movement steady, though her body still carried signs of weakness. "They are here," she said. Daniel's breath came fast, but his mind was clear. He looked at her and nodded. "Then we make our stand." The hunters arrived in silence. Their ship was small, no bigger than a house, but it gleamed with a smooth surface that reflected the moonlight. From it stepped figures taller than men, their armor dark and their movements sharp. They carried weapons that glowed faintly, and their faces were hidden behind glass-like masks. Daniel and his friends watched from the shadows of the trees. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay still. The hunters moved with precision, scanning the area, their voices low and strange, carried by a language Daniel did not understand. Kaylin crouched beside him, whispering in his ear, "They do not know how to fight like you. They expect order. You must give them chaos." Daniel nodded. He signaled to Mark and the others, who had prepared simple traps, wires, nets, and distractions hidden in the undergrowth. They were crude, compared to alien technology, but they were unpredictable. The first trap snapped when a hunter's foot caught the wire. A tree branch swung down hard, slamming into its side and knocking it off balance. The alien stumbled, its weapon firing. Wild beams into the night. Immediately, Daniel's group scattered, shouting from different directions, throwing stones and firing rifles. The hunters turned, their glowing weapons sweeping across the trees, but they could not focus. The chaos broke their order. Every time they aimed at one voice, another came from the opposite side. Every time they chased one figure, another trap snapped shut around their legs. Daniel himself moved like he had never moved before. He darted between trees, fired a shot, then disappeared again. His rifle could not pierce their armor, but it was not about damage. It was about confusion. He remembered Kaylin's words. Humans did not fight with perfect order. They fought with instinct, with tricks, with whatever they had. Kaylin, though weakened, joined the fight. She used a small device from her broken ship, a weapon that pulsed light strong enough to blind the hunters for a moment. With her help, Daniel's group forced them back toward their ship. The hunters, unused to resistance from a primitive world, hesitated. Their formation broke. One of them shouted in anger, and Daniel realized they were retreating. The ship's door opened, and the hunters moved quickly inside. A moment later, the ship rose into the air, glowing engines pushing it upward until it vanished into the night. Silence fell across the woods. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, sweat on his face, his rifle shaking in his hands. Mark walked up, beside him, his eyes wide. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. Daniel looked at him, then at Kaylin, who stood in the moonlight with calm strength. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "That," Daniel said, "is only the beginning." The woods were quiet again, but the silence felt heavy, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Daniel stood with his friends, staring at the empty sky where the hunter's ship had vanished. None of them spoke for a long time. Their rifles still shook in their hands, and their eyes were wide with disbelief. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "Daniel, what have you gotten us into?" His voice was low, almost trembling. Daniel looked at him, then at the others. They were his friends, people who had worked beside him, hunted with him, laughed with him. He wanted to tell them it was over, that the hunters would not return, but he could not lie. He had seen the way Kaylin looked at the sky. This was not finished. "They'll be back," Daniel said quietly, "and next time they won't make the same mistakes." The others exchanged uneasy glances. One man swore under his breath. Another shook his head and muttered about calling the sheriff, or even the military. But Daniel stopped them. "If they come, your sheriff won't stand a chance. Your soldiers won't either. We saw what those things can do. If we tell anyone, they'll lock us away, and she—" He stopped, realizing he had said too much. Mark frowned. "She?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. He could not hide it forever. He led them back to the barn. When the doors opened and Kaylin stepped into view, the men froze. Their fear was plain, but so was their wonder. Kaylin bowed her head slightly, her silver eyes calm. "I owe you thanks," she said softly. "Without your help, I would not be standing here." For a long time, no one spoke. Then Mark whispered, "She's real." Daniel nodded. "She's the reason they're here and the reason we have a chance." The others were not sure what to believe, but they had seen the hunters with their own eyes. No one turned away. Later, when the others had gone home, Daniel sat with Kaylin in the barn. The night air was cool, and the stars shone bright above them. Kaylin's wounds were healing faster now, though she still looked tired. Daniel stared at the ground, his hands folded together. "You said they'll keep coming," he murmured. "Yes," Kaylin replied. "They do not forgive failure. More hunters will come, stronger and more prepared. And if they learn what I know, they will bring the veil to your world." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we fight. Like we did tonight." Kaylin shook her head gently. "You cannot fight them forever. They will send armies, ships, weapons your people cannot imagine. No matter how brave you are, no matter how clever, Earth will fall if it stands alone." Daniel's chest tightened. He had known it deep down, but hearing her say it filled him with dread. "So what do we do?" Kaylin looked at him with quiet intensity. "You must choose. You can come with me when I repair the beacon. My people will answer it and we can flee before the hunters return. You will be safe. Or—" She paused, her silver eyes locking with his. "You can stay. You can resist. But if you stay, you will place yourself in danger. Your people will be caught in a war they do not understand. You will not survive easily." Daniel's heart pounded. Part of him longed to leave, to escape into the stars and never look back, to see worlds beyond, imagination, to find safety away from the hunters. But another part of him, the stronger part, thought of the town, the people, and the planet he called home. If he left, Earth would fall without even knowing what had come for it. He stood pacing across the barn. "I can't leave them," he said at last. "If these hunters bring the veil, they'll take everything. People won't even know they've lost. I can't run from that. Not if there's something I can do." Kaylin studied him for a long time. "You would stand against them, even knowing what they are? Even knowing the cost?" Daniel nodded firmly. "Yes. Maybe we can't match their weapons, but you said it yourself, we're unpredictable. That's our strength. If they can't control us, maybe we can use that. We'll fight in ways they don't expect." A faint smile touched Kaylin's lips, the first true smile he had seen from her. "That is the answer I hoped for." Daniel felt the weight of his choice settle over him, heavy but steady. He no longer felt small or useless. He felt alive, as if he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. The following days were spent preparing. Daniel and Mark gathered supplies, quietly spreading word among trusted friends who could be relied upon. They did not speak of aliens, not directly, but they spoke of danger, of the need to be ready. Hunters from the stars would not expect farmers, mechanics, and shopkeepers to rise against them. That was exactly why it might work. Kaylin showed Daniel how to use parts salvaged from her wrecked ship. Together they fashioned crude defenses, energy traps, devices that could blind sensors, tools meant for sabotage rather than direct combat. She taught him quickly, and he learned faster than she expected. His hands were rough from years of work, but his mind was quick, adapting to her strange technology as if he had always been meant to. One evening, as they worked side by side, Daniel glanced at her. "Why me?" he asked again, softer this time. "Out of all the people you could have met, why me?" Kaylin paused, then looked at him with steady eyes. "Because when I crashed, I saw a man who did not turn away. You could have run. You could have called others. But you carried me. You chose. That is what makes you the one I need." Her words filled him with quiet strength. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew he would face it head on. The hunters would return, and when they did, they would not find a broken world waiting for them. They would find humans, unpredictable, stubborn, and ready to fight. Daniel clenched his fists, his resolve firm. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The night was still when the hunters returned, but Daniel felt their presence before he even saw them. He was standing on the porch of his house watching the stars when the deep hum shook the air. The ground trembled slightly and his chest grew tight. They had come back just as Kaylin warned. He hurried to the barn where Kaylin waited, her silver eyes sharp. She had been expecting this moment too. "They are here," she said calmly. "This time, they will not test you. They will strike with all their strength." Daniel nodded, his jaw set. He turned to Mark and the others who were already gathering with rifles, tools, and makeshift traps. Some looked frightened, others determined, but all of them trusted Daniel. Now, they had seen what he had seen. They knew this was real. From the woods came the first glow of alien lights. The seekers swarmed ahead, their red beams sweeping across the ground, searching for movement. Behind them, the hunter ship descended slowly, its engines growling like thunder. It landed in the clearing outside town, and from its doors stepped, not 3 but a dozen hunters. Their dark armor gleamed and their weapons glowed with steady light. The men around Daniel muttered nervously. Some raised their rifles, but Daniel lifted his hand. "Wait," he whispered. "Not yet." He remembered. Kaylin's words, "Do not fight with order, fight with chaos." If they moved too soon, the hunters would crush them in an instant. They had to confuse, mislead, and overwhelm. The hunters began to spread out, their movements precise. They scanned with their weapons, covering every angle. But they did not know the land. They did not know the town. That was the humans' advantage. Mark whistled sharply, and in response, a net hidden in the trees dropped down on one of the hunters. The alien stumbled, slashing the net apart with its glowing blade, but the distraction worked. From another side, a man hurled a bucket of gasoline into a fire pit, sending flames roaring into the night. The sudden light blinded the seekers, their sensors scrambling. The hunters turned, aiming their weapons, but Daniel's group had already scattered into the woods. Shouts came from all directions, real voices and fake echoes created by metal sheets hung in the trees. Every noise drew the hunters' attention, pulling them in circles. Daniel crouched low, gripping a strange device Kaylin had given him. It looked like a broken piece of her ship, but she had shown him how to charge it. When he pressed the trigger, it released a burst of light so bright that even the hunters' helmets dimmed. "Now!" Daniel shouted. From the shadows, his friends attacked. Some fired rifles, the bullets pinging harmlessly off armor but drawing attention. Others set off traps, falling logs, tripwires, pits dug hastily into the earth. The hunters tried to form a line, but chaos tore through their order. Kaylin joined the fight, her strength returned. She carried a small weapon salvaged from her wreck. With each shot, it released a sharp beam of energy that forced the hunters to dive for cover. She moved beside Daniel, her face calm even in the storm of battle. One hunter raised its glowing weapon toward Daniel, but before it could fire, Mark leapt from behind a tree, swinging a heavy iron pipe into its arm. The alien staggered, its shot flying harmlessly into the sky. Daniel fired his rifle not to kill but to keep the creature off balance. Together they forced it back, but the hunters were not easy prey. One by one, they regrouped, their glowing weapons cutting through the night. A blast struck the ground near Daniel, throwing him to the dirt. His ears rang, and for a moment he could not breathe. Kaylin dragged him up, her grip surprisingly strong. "You must not fall," she said firmly. "I'm not done yet," Daniel growled, wiping dirt from his face. They retreated deeper into the woods, drawing the hunters farther from their ship. That was the plan, to stretch them thin, to make them chase ghosts. The townsfolk had set traps all through the forest, and each step the hunters took triggered another surprise. Spikes of sharpened wood, fire pits, even loud radios hidden in the brush. All small things, but each added to the confusion. Still the hunters pressed forward. Their voices echoed in their strange language, sharp and angry. Daniel could see the glow of their armor moving through the trees, relentless. "We can't hold them forever," Mark panted, loading his rifle again. Daniel looked at Kaylin, who nodded. Then we must end it here. They set one last trap. At the heart of the woods lay an old quarry pit, deep and hidden by brush. Daniel and the others lured the hunters toward it, shouting, firing, and retreating step by step. The hunters followed, believing they were closing in. When the first alien stepped onto the brush, the ground gave way. The pit swallowed 3 hunters at once, their armor crashing against stone. Others stumbled back in surprise. That was when Kaylin raised her weapon and fired a beam into the sky. It struck the hunter's ship, not to destroy but to blind its sensors. The ship roared, its engines shaking the trees, but without guidance it hovered blindly. The hunters on the ground shouted, their order broken again. Daniel seized the moment. "Now!" he cried. Every man and woman left standing surged forward, throwing rocks, firing rifles, striking with anything they had. The hunters staggered, under the wave of chaos. Their weapons fired wildly, but they could not hold their line. Slowly, step by step, they began to retreat toward their ship. At last, one of them shouted, and the group pulled back. The ship's engines roared louder, lifting it into the air. In moments it was gone, vanishing into the night sky, leaving silence behind. Daniel stood in the clearing, his chest heaving, his hands trembling. His friends gathered around him, their faces pale but alive. They had faced something no one on Earth had ever faced before, and won. Kaylin stepped beside him, her silver eyes shining. "You see now," she said softly. "Your people can stand. You can fight. You are not helpless." Daniel looked at her, then at his friends, then at the stars above. For the first time in his life, he felt certain of something. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not small. Humanity was the chaos the galaxy could not predict, and the hunters would learn that Earth was not theirs to take. The night after the hunters fled was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Daniel sat near the barn with Kaylin, his body sore from the battle. Around them the townsfolk rested, tending to wounds and repairing what little damage they could. No one celebrated. They knew this was only the beginning. Kaylin sat with her back against the wooden wall, her silver eyes watching the stars above. "They will return," she said softly. "Hunters. Do not give up, but they will not come the same way again. They will bring more and they will strike harder." Daniel rubbed his hands together, staring at the dirt. "Then we're doomed. We barely survived this fight. Next time..." He trailed off, unable to finish. Kaylin turned to him, her gaze steady. "Not doomed. Stronger. What you did here will not be forgotten. My people will hear of this. They will come." Daniel frowned. "And what then? Another war? Another fight? Only bigger?" Her voice softened. "Yes. But you will not face it alone. My people are scattered and afraid, but if they see humans resist the veil, if they see you stand, they will have hope again." Daniel shook his head slowly. He had never wanted to be a leader, never wanted to carry such a weight. Yet somehow, in a single week, he had gone from an ordinary man to someone fighting against the stars. The next day, a strange light streaked across the sky. At first, the townsfolk thought it was another hunter ship, and panic spread. But Kaylin's expression changed. She rose quickly, her voice urgent. "That is not the enemy, that is one of ours." The light grew larger until a sleek ship, unlike the hunters, descended carefully into the fields outside town. It landed with a quiet hum, and from its doors stepped figures in silver armor that glimmered like moonlight. They were tall and graceful, but their movements carried no hostility. The townsfolk gathered cautiously. Daniel stood at the front, rifle still in his hands. The leader of the new arrivals lifted his helmet, revealing features similar to Kaylin's. Pale skin, sharp lines, eyes that glowed faintly like starlight. He looked at Daniel first, then at Kaylin. "You survived," the alien said to her, his voice carrying relief. Kaylin bowed her head slightly. "I survived because of him," she said, pointing to Daniel, "and because of his people." The Alien studied Daniel with quiet curiosity. "This is the human you spoke of?" "Yes," Kalen answered. "The one their weapon cannot control. The proof that humans are what we need." Daniel shifted uneasily under their gaze. He wasn't sure he liked being called the one in front of everyone, but he stood tall anyway, refusing to look away. The alien leader turned to the others. "Then she was right. Humans resist the veil. That means there is still hope." Murmurs spread among the silver-armored figures. Some looked doubtful, others inspired. The leader raised his hand, silencing them. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice rough but steady. "I'm no soldier. None of us are. But if what she says is true, then you're going to need us. And if what I saw last night is just a taste of what's coming, then we'll need you too. We can't do this alone. Neither of us." The leader tilted his head, then nodded slowly. "You speak with courage. Perhaps that is the secret of your kind. Not strength, not weapons, but the will to stand even when defeat seems certain." Kalen's eyes shone as she looked at Daniel. "That is why I needed you. That is why I crashed here. It was not chance, it was fate." For a long moment, the humans and aliens stood together in the field, two worlds meeting under the same sky. The fear that had gripped the town began to ease, replaced by something new, possibility. But Daniel knew it would not be simple. War was coming, the hunters would return, and the veil would spread if they did not stop it. He looked around at the people he had grown up with, simple farmers, mechanics, and workers. They were tired, wounded, and afraid. Yet they had stood against the hunters and forced them back. He realized then that Kalen was right. Humanity was unpredictable. Humanity was chaos. Humanity was hope. That night, as stars burned bright above, Daniel sat alone for a while, thinking about the path ahead. He felt the weight of what was coming, but also a fire in his chest he had never known before. He thought of Kalen's words, of his friend's courage, of the hunters retreating in defeat. For the first time he felt proud, not just of himself, but of his people. They were not the small, forgotten world the galaxy thought them to be. They were something more. Kalen joined him quietly, sitting beside him on the porch. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "You have already changed the future, Daniel. The rest will follow." He looked at her, then at the stars above, and nodded. "Then let them come. We'll be ready." The wind carried his words into the night, and somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew they would echo far beyond Earth, across worlds yet unseen. Humanity's fight had only just begun, but it was no longer a fight they would face alone. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel smiled.